Hello and welcome to On My Block, where we pretty much talk about anything that matters to you. I'm new, and today we have the lovely Mistress Judianne Bend in the studio with us. She goes by the name Persistent Parent, but you'll hear a little bit more about that. I just want to talk briefly about what we're going to chat about today, and that is autism. Off camera, Mistress Ben would have shared about the challenges that she have with autism, as two of her daughters were diagnosed with autism at an early age, one son with type 1 diabetes, and the eldest, yes, she has four children, has no disabilities at all. I know we've heard autism or the term autism, but I just want to give a brief definition. And this is from autism.org. It says, autism spectrum disorder, ADS, is a complex developmental disability typically appearing during childhood and affecting persons' ability to communicate and interact with others. But who better to tell you more about this than the lovely Mistress Judianne Bend? Welcome to On My Block.
Good to have me here.
Wonderful. Now you call yourself the persistent parent, and I'm sure that our viewers would like to know a little bit about what that is or how that came about.
Well, being a persistent parent, there are things that you have to adapt yourself to, and like things you could say, things you cannot say, things you do, and things you cannot do. You have to have a different perspective of how you view things. You may view things according to the way how you would probably be raised, but then when you have children with such diagnoses, you have to literally change. And because of that, in doing that, I realized I had to be persistent and consistent also with it. So it's only through them and doing the things that I did that I recognized then that I was a persistent parent.
Okay, so in a nutshell, is really managing all of these different situations or disabilities, because there are two with autism and then there's the son with type 1 diabetes. So it's pretty much how to manage all of that and still carry on with your everyday life.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so let's talk a little bit about the autism and when it first happened or when you first recognized that something was wrong with your second daughter.
It's only being pregnant with our last daughter, we had to get our second daughter into a nursery. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, going to the nursery, you expect children to interact, as socializing, you expect more speech, more interaction, you're coming home with more words and you're seeing what happened at school, basically in like a two-sentence word and stuff like that. And so I recognized with her that we weren't getting that. And however, I give it some time because, some children tends to learn at different levels and different speed, And it's only then that with our last daughter, that the nurse had called me she wanted to discuss what was going on with our second daughter. And then she was the nurse for the nursery that she was going to at that point in time, and she said she had some concerns in how she was not speaking in terms of two-sentence words. She wasn't calling the words, actually. And so then we had to monitor it then, and in so doing, after a while, then we had to take her to the doctor and let them know the concerns that we had experienced. And they then wrote up a letter for us to take to the AC Green Development Center.
Wow. I could just imagine the impact that would have had on both you and your husband and also your eldest daughter, because she has no disabilities. Would you like to share a little bit about how that news would have hit home?
It was like, what is autism? It's like what you have to find out about it. And so then at first for me, when I heard about it, and I was thinking that it would be easy. Because it's just a matter of the speech, you know, and just a matter of how you speak and in front of your child. But then when I realized the whole range that come with it and responsibilities that come with it is like, this is so much.
Wow.
And in being so much, it was like depressing. Because it was like at that time, it's like, it's way over your head. It's like, how am I going to deal with this? Am I going to handle this? You know, and so it was kind of depressing for quite a few months.
Oh, wow. I can't imagine. What about your husband? How did he handle the news?
For him, it was hard. And for him, he related to work. It was like, that is my secret, my safety zone from having to really deal with the situation. Yes, I am going to supply, but for him, it's like, I prefer to be at work, you know, and because it's like how to cope with it. And so the hardest thing is once you know how to cope with it, then it becomes much easier. So it was kind of challenging for him as well.
And I could understand because there's some people who just got one diagnosis, but you have two. And that it means double the everything. So I could just imagine, what about your eldest daughter? How did she cope? And how is she coping actually with it?
For her, it was hard. And I kind of felt sorry in a sense, not so regretting that I had the children, but sorry that for her in a sense that it's like, hey, you welcome your siblings, and it's like you're looking forward to the growing up and playing and you know communicating and the whole aspect of it. But for her to come to a place that I can't communicate with my siblings because she was so young, you know, and what can I do? You know, and in so doing, I had to get some help in terms of how to help her. And one of the things, and in getting help, sometimes getting help may not be always by people that you literally know. But for me getting help, I got help through a book that I had ordered online with a family who had children. And one of the son was autistic. And one of the things that the author had recommended, anything that you have children, and one is autistic and the other is normal, and let that one that is normal, you know, get out more, so that they won't have to deal with the whole pressure of that. And in so doing, there are many times that she had opportunities to go, but in so doing, it's quick is she goes out. We would say, look, you know, you can go, this is, you know, you can have 6 hours out, you can have 4, you know, and you can come back home so that she won't have to face that responsibility. And even though that we set that boundary, even within that time frame, less than time frame, she would come back home. I said, but what happened? You know, but I wanted to come back home and help you.
Oh, dear.
You know, so it was hard for her, but even though it was hard, she was still willing to help.
That is actually awesome because you really need that support. And with that said, do you know exactly where your children are on the autism spectrum? Because I understand there is an umbrella of our terms of conditions, and it would be nice to know if you were ever given that information so that you could pinpoint exactly how to go about dealing with each of them, as they do have autism, but I'm assuming that they are unique in their own ways, and we're not professionals here, but from the little that we know, we still understand that there are individuals and we'll still need to have that individual care.
Well, right now, the level of autism comes in various spectrums. And you have the low mild, where there's some children that can still function academically, right? And still able to manage to do things. And yes, they may need a level of speech therapy, but it's not as much as like if the person is mild to severe. Because then with the mild, then yes, speech therapy is a must. Occupational therapy is a must. And then depends on the level of where the child is at, because like when it goes severe, then there are times where the children may have to get medicated. For my daughters, they don't have to get medicated, right? And in so doing, they were at the mild stage. And so it's just a matter of teaching them how to speak. And for me, I literally had to stop with the long sentences and shorten my sentences. So like if I say, I want you to go and sit down, I would just have to say, sit down. Because if you say, I want you to go and sit down, they're going to hear the first word and they're going to hear the last word. They're not going to hear between there. So you have to do it in stages. Every child is not like, there's some that speak quickly and there's some that won't speak quickly, and then there's some that take years before they can actually.
So you found that you had to do this with both children, where you just spoke about, I happen to say, sit down rather than go and sit down. You found that the two of them responded the same way to that? Or?
Not at same, because like with our second daughter, I could say, followed by her name, sit down. But like for her younger sibling, just the two words, right? And then it comes to the level of understanding too that they're at. For our second daughter, she could understand words, but with our last daughter, you had to do words and action. So it's like, if I want you to pick up the blanket, I had to hold her hand, pick up the blanket. And once I say pick up the blanket, frequently, and repetition is key, and it can be very tiring. But once they get that, and they say pick up the blanket without having to do the action, she will be able to understand.
Wow, wonderful. So how about when you got the diagnosis, did you ever ask the healthcare professional or the doctor at the time how the whole diagnosis for the children, the autism for the children came about? If it was hereditary on your side or your husband's side, or?
Well, to be quite honest, the when they attend the AC Green Development Center, from my husband's side, that family tends to have autism in that side, on his side. So that, in a sense, could be hereditary, right? But it's only recently, actually this year, that I found out that from my side, that I had two family that is on the autism spectrum as well.
Okay, well, with that said then, could you have pulled then from the knowledge that the parents from both your side, or the family members actually, from both sides would have gone through, did you pull rather from their experiences and how to handle your own children?
No, actually, because, from my husband's side, his cousin was overseas. And from my perspective, I never knew that I had family members that was on the autistic spectrum side. But having said that, from my side, they never talk about it. And even though that I know them so well, it's kind of sad that, I'm not really, I won't want to say it's sad, but then there's some people who don't know how to, and don't know how to share this story, or may not be even bold enough to share this story. And especially when you come from back then, and when I say back then, back in the 80s and stuff like that, you never used to hear nothing, so people will hide their children and keep them home when, like that. And so, you never really heard anything much. They never shared their story, you know. I guess for them it was frustrating. Yes, for them I don't want nobody to know my business, you know. And I can't understand to a certain extent, but
Or maybe there wasn't enough avenues to seek help, as there is now.
right.
We have social media, and you have everything pretty much at your fingertips, you know.
Yes.
Whereas back then, it might have been a bit difficult.
Right.
But you talked earlier about the centers, especially AC Graham Center and the other centers that you would have enrolled your children in. And I would like to hear a little bit more, because I'm sure that's going to help our viewers, for those who don't know that there are centers available that you can take your children to.
Yes. With my daughters, the first center that they were enrolled at was the Early Sunshine Stimulation Center. Mm-hmm. And they equipped me with quite a lot, because myself and Dad didn't know how to handle our children. And nothing's wrong with that, you know. And so me personally, I had to get on board, really had to get on board to see how best to work with these children so that they can be kind of, we will call, quote, normal children, you know. And so, in so doing, I had a lot of workshops. I was always willing to learn. That's another thing, always willing to learn, you know. And so in learning, attending workshops, then we had a lady from overseas that has a program, still running up to this day, More Than Words program, and she would equip us how to handle these children, and she gives scenarios like follow their leads, you know, and that's something that we as parents, we don't like to hear, follow children leads. Parent, but the reality is you do have to follow their leads, or you would be the person that will end up in trouble, right? Yes, the child will end up not able to cope, but in following their leads, they're teaching you how to deal with them and what is comfortable for them, you know, in a sense. So I had the More Than Words program. So that was the school that they were enrolled at to
So I just want to jump in there for a second. So the More Than Words program, was that an in-house program, or was that something that was done online? Like I can go and actually retrieve that from the internet, or was it?
Well, back then when we first started, we will go to the center, and then there are times they will come into the home, right? And it's more something
hands-on.
Yeah, it's more something like how we have the nanny overseas.
Oh, yes.
They come in and she will work with you and see what the child does and give you some pointers, and not only pointers, but in the hour that we will have with them, what she will left all the working, write some notes, so that we, the parents, can follow up at home, so that when she do come back, because she wants to visit, like, see us once a year. And when it says see us once a year, it doesn't mean that she doesn't come back to us, because there are other children as well, right? And so when we come back with you will see that the children advance, and then they could go on to another level.
Oh, that is excellent. Now, earlier in the definition of autism, we would have talked about the communication skills and the interacting with other people. So I'm assuming that you would have had instances where the children might have acted out in crowds or in areas where, you know, it had seemed a bit frightening because they were small at the time.
Yes.
And I would like you to share just a little bit about that and how you dealt with that.
Well, for our daughters, they didn't like crowds.
Both of them?
Both of them. But the two act differently. So our second daughter, she would cling on to me, like if we're in the bus. If everybody's sitting, it's fine. But the minute that everybody is standing up, they have people standing up, and start to get crowded, it's like cleaner, and her sibling will cry. And when I say cry, it wasn't a normal cry. It was, her crying was very loud. It was like a scream, right? And people out of ignorance will talk, and I don't follow them because I too was like that. Man, I was like, you know. So I had to. I remember one scenario when I was on there taking them to school, and we had to catch the bus, and the bus was full, and my second daughter hold on to me, and while the other one scream and scream and scream, and you know, and one lady who knew of the situation said, "Are they okay?" I said, "The crowd, it is too. The bus is too crowded," and so the only way that I was able to get her to calm down was give her blanket, because she was very attached to blankets as well. And sometimes that will help, sometimes it doesn't help. But continue, there are times that when I take them into town, even though that the crowd was hustling and bustling, eventually they realize, well, hey, this is not so bad, you know, and they grow out of it.
That's excellent. You know, I remember or recall a scenario. I was in Whole Town at a point, and I saw this guy in the distance, and the child was probably maybe about 7, 8, and he was shouting at this child, "You don't hear what I see, you're not listening." And then he got to a point where he actually reached over and started choking the child. I ran from where I was, and I was like, "Sir, what are you doing?" And I guess it was because I saw from a distance that the child had some kind of disability, not fully knowing what it was. But I said, "Sir, what are you doing? This is not the way to handle it." And he starts out, and he just goes, "You don't understand. This child is giving me a lot. Don't ever listen to me. He don't listen to nothing that I ain't telling him." And he just rattled off everything he could have think about. And everything was about, I. And I was like, "Okay, sir, I do understand your frustration, but do you think this is the way to handle this? He's always going to remember this, and he's always going to react this very same way if you continue down the road." He was like, "Don't tell me how to," you know how we just get when you try to say anything about their child. "Don't tell me how to raise, but you don't understand it." Just, and I was like, "Oh, if you could only get some kind of education and knowledge on how to deal with this child," because you could see that the child, it's actually in the face of the child, you can see that there is some disability, but he refuses to listen, and he thinks that his way is just corporal punishment, choking, beating with a belt, with a twig, it doesn't matter. So it's good to hear that you found a way to deal with it, and it's really out of ignorance that I think, even ignorance as us as the public looking on, because sometimes we assume that every child that shows a tantrum, "Oh, my mother isn't raising that child properly," or "That child, if it was me, I would get some hot licks. I would take off my slipper and I would this," not knowing that there is a disability taking place. There is some kind of condition that is causing the child to react in the way that it did. Well, Mistress Ben, I really want to thank you as we have come to the end of our first episode. Again, this is On My Block, and it was so wonderful to have you. If you stay tuned with us, we are going to bring to you episode 2, where we chat a little bit more with Mistress Judianne Bend about her daughters and others. Thank you, and have a good day.